Hello and welcome to your first lecture video for General Anatomy and Physiology. And we're going to be starting here with Chapter 1, where we are just looking at an introduction to anatomy and physiology, and you'll learn some terminology and some basic concepts. As you're preparing for a career in the health field, it's very essential that you understand this terminology. You'll be using this a lot, not only in this class and in advanced A&P if you need to take advanced, but you'll also be using these terms in your healthcare field. As we go through this class, you're going to discover that you'll probably need a basic understanding of chemistry, biology, a little bit of physics, and some mathematics as well. Once you enter your program, you're going to see that this class helps to prepare you for classes like pharmacology, pathophysiology, microbiology, psychology, and other classes. So let's first talk about what anatomy and physiology is. Anatomy is the study of internal and external structures and the physical relationships between body parts. Basically, you're identifying structures. And so to do this part of the class, you will need to have good memorization skills. And the best way to memorize things is just constant repetition. So sometimes students will use index cards, sometimes they will have other people quiz them, but it is a memorization skill that you need to develop or enhance. Physiology is the study of how living organisms perform their vital functions. So basically, anatomy is structure and physiology is function. Now, in understanding function, you'll have to learn steps of processes, you'll have to use critical thinking and try to think about, well, what would happen if this step in the process didn't occur or this was missing from the process. And so the physiology part is more than just memorization. It's using your critical thinking skills to really understand how things work in the body. As we go through each chapter, I like to make up concept maps to help me chunk the materials into smaller segments to study. So I'm going to show you a concept map for Chapter 1. So Chapter 1 again is just an introduction to anatomy and physiology. And I've chunked this chapter into 4 separate sections. In the first section, which is what we're going to see on this video, we look at the characteristics of living things, the levels of organization in the body, and the 11 different body systems. In the next video, I'll talk about homeostasis. Homeostasis includes intrinsic or extrinsic homeostasis, the different components that are used to maintain homeostasis, and the different types of feedback systems. In the third video, we'll look at superficial anatomy. This is where we'll look at landmarks, positions that the body can be in, different regions and quadrants of the abdominal pelvic area, and then planes and sections. And then finally, in the last video, we'll look at body cavities that include both the dorsal and the ventral body cavities. The dorsal cavity is made up of the cranial and spinal cavities, and the ventral cavity is made up of the thoracic and abdominal pelvic cavities. The thoracic cavity has 2 subdivisions, the pleural and the pericardium, and the abdominal pelvic cavity has both the abdominal cavity and the pelvic cavity. And a portion of the abdominal cavity and a portion of the pelvic cavity make up the peritoneal cavity. Then we'll look at the serous membranes that surround and protect these cavities and allow movement of the organs inside those cavities to prevent friction. So let's start this chapter then by looking at the characteristics of living things. The human body is a living thing, and all living things, whether we're talking about a single cell to a complex organism like a human being, they all share certain basic characteristics. Living things can be anything from plants to bacteria to the human body. But the human body also has cells, and cells can be characterized as a living thing. There are billions of cells in the body, and many of these cells have the same characteristics of the human body as a whole. Let's go over the characteristics that all living things have. First of all, organization. Every living thing has a discrete boundary that separates it from its environment, and the conditions within the organism are often very different from those outside it. So, for instance, the human body has skin, and that's a boundary, and it separates what's going on inside the body from what's going on outside the body. Second, all living things have a responsiveness. Responsiveness means that the body is able to respond to changes. Sometimes the body responds immediately in order to protect itself, and sometimes it learns to adapt to the changes. The third characteristic that all living things have are growth and differentiation. So cells are able to grow in size, and when they grow in size, we call this hypertrophy. Cells can also increase in the number of cells that there are by going through mitosis and dividing, which is called hyperplasia. And cells have different functions, special functions, and we call this differentiation, where some cells might function to contract, to perform movement, and some cells might function to secrete hormones. The next characteristic of living things is that they have the ability to reproduce. Reproduction is the creation of subsequent generations. If living things did not have this ability, then they would die out and there wouldn't be any subsequent generations. Next, there's movement. All living things have the ability to move. Internally, movement occurs with the transportation of food and blood throughout the body, and externally, the body has the ability to move through the environment. And lastly, the last characteristic of living things is metabolism. Metabolism are all of the chemical operations that occur in the body. There's metabolism in the respiratory system, where absorption and transport and the use of oxygen is used by the cells. There's metabolism that occurs during excretion, when metabolic byproducts are eliminated as waste. There's metabolism that occurs in digestion, when food is broken down in specialized areas of the digestive tract. And there's metabolism in the circulatory system, which is the internal transport system transporting oxygen, carbon dioxide, nutrients, and waste products, as well as water. The anatomical structures and physiological mechanisms in the body are arranged in a series of interacting levels of organization. This picture here illustrates these levels. You should be able to describe the levels of organization from the chemical or molecular level to the organism level. The smallest level of organization is the chemical level of organization, and the largest level of organization is the organism or the human body. So let's just go through these levels of organization so we can see each of the different levels. In the chemical level of organization, we have atoms, molecules, and organelles. So an atom is the smallest stable structure in the chemical level of organization. And you've had chemistry, so you know the different atoms. Hydrogen, carbon, oxygen, and nitrogen are atoms that are found in abundance in the human body. Now, these atoms can be put together to make a larger structure called a molecule. Different molecules that we find in the body are water, glucose, and glucose can be added to another glucose molecule to form glycogen. There's also glycerol and fatty acid, and glycerol and fatty acid can be put together to make a triglyceride. There's also phospholipids, there are amino acids, and when we put amino acids together, it forms a peptide. And if we put enough amino acids together and the peptide is long enough, that creates a protein. Then also in this chemical level, if we put molecules together, we can form organelles. Organelles are parts of the cells in your body. So just in this chemical level of organization, we started out very small with an atom and we built it into a bigger structure called a molecule, and then took molecules and built them into a bigger structure called an organelle. Then we get the next level of organization, which is cellular. So the cellular level of organization is larger than the chemical level of organization. In the cellular level of organization, we take these organelles and put them together to form a cell. The cell will consist of a cell membrane that's made up of phospholipids and proteins and glycogen, and it's filled with proteins. There are billions of cells in your body, and groups of cells will be unique to other groups of cells. For instance, the red blood cells in your body are very different from the cardiac muscle cells in your body. The next level of organization is the tissue level of organization. In the tissue level of organization, we take like cells and put them together to form a tissue. There are only 4 main tissue types in your body. There's epithelial tissues, connective tissues, muscle tissue, and neural tissue. So here is an example of an epithelial tissue. Epithelial tissues are made up of squamous cells. All the squamous cells are alike. Another example is cardiac tissue. Cardiac tissue is a tissue that includes a grouping of cardiac cells. So now we can see that the tissue level of organization is bigger than the cellular organization. Tissues have many cells in them. The next level of organization is the organ level of organization. An organ contains several different tissues. Here is an example of the heart. So the heart includes an epithelium that lines the internal cavities inside the heart. It consists of cardiac muscle tissue, and it also has a connective tissue that surrounds it. So there are 3 different tissue types in this one organ: epithelial tissue, muscle tissue, and connective tissue. So you can see how the organ level of organization is bigger than the tissue level of organization. The next level of organization are organ systems. An organ system contains several organs. So in the cardiovascular system, it includes the heart, blood vessels, and blood. So there are several different organs within this organ system. The heart is an organ, and blood vessels are an organ, and blood is another component of the cardiovascular system. There are 11 different organ systems in your body that we're going to go over. Finally, we get to the largest level of organization, or the most complex level of organization, and that is the organism. An organism, such as the human body, contains all 11 organ systems. You should be able to describe each of the levels of organization from the simplest or smallest to the largest or the most complex. In other words, you should be able to describe the levels of organization from the chemical or molecular level to the organism level. Here are the 11 different organ systems in your body, and we'll be talking about these as we go through the semester. The integumentary system is the first system that we're going to look at. It consists of the skin, the hair, the sweat glands, and the nails, and it functions to protect against environmental hazards, and it helps to regulate your body temperature. It also provides sensory information. So we're going to start with that one. That's chapter 5. Then we're going to look at the skeletal system. In the skeletal system, that will be chapters 6 through chapter 9. And the skeletal system consists mostly of bones and cartilages. There's also ligaments that we'll look at and bone marrow. And mostly the skeletal system functions to provide support and protection for other tissues, but it also stores minerals like calcium. And it also has bone marrow, which forms blood cells, like red blood cells and white blood cells. Then we're going to look at the muscular system. The muscular system will be in chapters 10 and 11. And in the muscular system, the major organs are skeletal muscles. And that functions basically for movement, but it also can help to protect and support other tissues. And skeletal muscle can also generate heat and help to maintain body temperature. Then we'll look at the nervous system. The nervous system is chapters 12 through 17. The organs of the nervous system include the brain and the spinal cord and peripheral nerves. The nervous system functions to direct immediate responses to stimuli. It also coordinates activities throughout the body, and it can also interpret sensory information about things that are going on outside your environment that might affect your body. Then we have the endocrine system, which is chapter 18. The endocrine system consists of the pituitary gland, thyroid gland, pancreas, adrenal glands, the gonads like the ovaries and the testes, and other endocrine tissues. Even though we cover this in just one chapter, you're going to see that the endocrine system is scattered throughout all the other systems of the body. The endocrine system functions to direct long-term changes. So the nervous system was short-term immediate responses. The endocrine system is more long-term responses. It also helps to adjust metabolism, and it controls other changes that occur during development. Then we're going to look at the cardiovascular system. The cardiovascular system is chapters 19 through 21. The main structures or organs in this system are the heart, the blood, and the blood vessels. The cardiovascular system distributes blood cells, water, nutrients, waste products, gases like oxygen and carbon dioxide to and from tissues. It also helps to distribute heat. So it also assists in controlling body temperature. Then we have the lymphatic system. That's chapter 22. The organs in the lymphatic system include the spleen, the thymus, lymphatic vessels, lymph nodes, and the tonsils. The lymphatic system defends against infection and disease, so it's defending your body against bacteria and viruses and cancers. And it also helps to return tissue fluids to the bloodstream. So when you have that sprained ankle, the fluid in your tissues gets redistributed to your bloodstream by going through the lymphatic system. Then we have the respiratory system. That's chapter 23. The major organs include the upper respiratory system, like your nasal cavities and your sinuses. Then there's the larynx, the trachea, the bronchi, the lungs, and the little tiny air sacs called alveoli. The respiratory system delivers air to the alveoli in the lungs, and then from the alveoli into the bloodstream to deliver oxygen to the tissues. And then the blood picks up carbon dioxide from the tissues and carries it back to the lungs so you can breathe it out. The digestive system is chapter 24. The digestive system includes the teeth, the tongue, the pharynx, the esophagus, the stomach, the small intestine, large intestine, liver, gallbladder, and pancreas. The digestive system functions to digest your food and then to absorb the nutrients and the water from your food and drink, and then helps to store the energy that comes from those nutrients. In the urinary system, which is chapter 26, it includes major organs like the kidneys and the tracts from the kidneys called the ureters, the urinary bladder, and then the urethra. The urinary system functions to excrete waste products from the blood, so it filters the blood and gets rid of the wastes. It also controls water balance by regulating the volume of urine that's produced. It also stores urine prior to eliminating it from the body. Then we have the reproductive system, and the reproductive system is different in the male than the female. In the male reproductive system, there are the testes, the epididymis, the ductus deferens, seminal vesicles, prostate gland, the penis, and the scrotum. And the functions of the male reproductive system are to produce the male sex cells, which are called the sperm. Also, in the male reproductive system, fluids are produced from the glands as well as hormones. And the male organ system also functions in sexual intercourse. In the female reproductive system, the major organs are the ovaries and the uterine tubes, the uterus, the vagina, the labia or lips, the clitoris, and the mammary glands. The female reproductive system functions to produce female sex cells called oocytes as well as hormones. It also supports a developing embryo from conception all the way to delivery. And once the baby is delivered, the female reproductive system provides milk to nourish the newborn infant. And the female reproductive system is also involved in sexual intercourse. This ends our first lecture video in anatomy and physiology. So I know there's a lot going on with those organ systems. I'm not expecting you to know everything about all of these organ systems, but I do expect you to know a few of the organs, at least the main organs in each one of these organ systems, and at least one function from these organ systems.